So out of that 7,000 acres, there's a plan. So I don't understand then the criticism for 400 acres of, you can reproduce the thought pattern. So give me the argument for this, why this 400 acres in Monterey Downs is such a big deal.
Simplistically, it's been reduced down to trees. That there is a pristine oak habitat out there that should be preserved, and that there's recreational opportunities and ecotourism opportunities, that those trees and those areas that's the value of them. And the argument is that that is more valuable than the economic aspects of a university-centric development project that would develop around the university. The other portion of the argument is that the development should happen on the, what they say is blighted area,
right.
That being the places that have asphalt on them.
The motor pools with the big spots, the concrete, the motor pools, the wrecked barracks, all that.
Exactly. But under the heading of blight also is this fact that there is a large amount of unexploded munitions out there. And the fact is that when the Army left, they made a commitment that they would clean it up. And during the course of time, all sorts of habitat has grown up around these munitions. There's a group that says, don't worry about it, those munitions aren't dangerous. And yet I've got newspaper articles from the 70s and early 80s where children were killed out there. That they went out, they crawled under the fence, as all inquisitive kids do. As an adult, you know enough not to pick up a hand grenade.
Sure.
I mean, you're 30, you're out there hiking around, you're not going to pick up a hand grenade. A 10-year-old doesn't know the difference. And children were killed out there. They lost legs, they lost arms by picking up unexploded munitions. The fact that nobody's been killed out there in the last 15 or 20 years doesn't mean it's not dangerous. And so in order to get rid of those munitions, these trees, some of them have to be removed. Some of the areas cleared by fire. Some is tested with new electronics that go ahead and tell you where things are buried.
Right.
But in certain cases where trees have well grown up over some munitions, those trees have to be removed. It was originally hundreds of acres. I believe it's now down to about 12 acres.
Yeah, I think people do not understand that a lot of, I think, let me just back up for a second. A lot of people think that all of the rounds that the military use are practice rounds, which is a majority of the case. Let's say 88% of the time, troops use practice rounds. They're inert, they're painted blue. But then there's another 20% of the time that, because active rounds are different, they have a different ballistic, they have a different impact, that in my experience, about 20% of the time we got a chance to use live fire. So there are live, and about, I would say, depending on who manufactured it, there's probably a good 20% of that ordnance that didn't explode. And I've seen it with my own eyes, like, oh, that was a dud, bummer. So what means is somebody has to clear that.
Sure.
So there is, and there could be unexploded ordnance that is dangerous, that's fully active. I think I heard an argument that, well, they used practice rounds. Yeah, well, not 100%.
No.
So I guess unexploded ordnance could be an issue.
Well, there was also the unanticipated casual disposal of munitions when soldiers coming back from the field didn't want to go back and have to spend the time inventorying what they didn't use.
I've seen that too.
Tossed them out of the back of the truck on the way in.
Or buried it in a lake. Or,
exactly.
Yeah, so that's happened. I've never done it myself because of the felony, but some people are just lazy because you have to count for all those rounds.
Well, I remember when I was on the California Coastal Commission and there was a dredging project in the San Diego harbor, and all of a sudden when they started spewing out the sand on the nearby beach because they were pumping it out, all these rounds of unspent ammunition came out on the beach because as the ships would come in, they dumped them off the aft deck into the ocean, so they didn't have to go ahead and re-inventory.
Sure, that's a pain. All right, so that's Monterey Downs. That's water. You and I talked briefly about your trip to Ireland. Do you want to just get that in there so we can get it on the table and be done with it?
Absolutely. You never know looking at me, but I'm actually Irish. I'm adopted, but I feel I'm Irish. I look Irish. I have all the Irish mannerisms. So for the last couple of years, my wife and I have gone to Ireland. She took me there for my 60th birthday, and then the following year, I have a friend who was getting married over there. He invited me to the wedding. It was late June of last year. That person also happens to be a mutual friend of Brian Boudreau, the architect of the Monterey Downs project.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we were at the same wedding together. A coming out of the same source as the previous allegation regarding Steve Collins, comes an allegation that somehow, because we're at the same wedding, I must have been a guest of Mr. Boudreau's on the way over while I was over there. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard of. I mean, it's not a crime to go to a wedding with somebody you know. Boudreau came in some other way. I believe he was either in Paris or London or something. Never saw him until I get to the wedding. I go to the wedding, and I paid for my own flight. Obviously, I've got the tickets. I've turned that in. Got my receipts from where we stayed. On the way back for the 4th of July, I stopped off, as I have for many, many years. We stopped off at my mother's in Boston, or just south of Boston. We're at the 4th of July. I'm on to see Boudreau again and tell him whenever he was back up here on the last Monterey Downs meeting after that. So it's pretty much just another classic case where you can say anything you want about an elected official, and as an elected official, I have to just prove that I'm innocent.
Of course.
Don't ever invite me to a wedding.
I promise.
We can't be seen together.
It's pretty amazing.
Well, I've known Boudreau for years. I mean, I've known him for at least a decade. So just because you have a friend that's in the development business doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be supporting anything he does. Sure. I've said no to a lot of good friends.
Let's go to this break. I have a break coming up. Let's take this break, and when we come back, let's go with what you see for the future of Monterey County. How about that?
Love to.
We'll be right back.
Thanks.
All right.